Hello, and welcome to another episode of Answering Anti-Islam. As you can tell, I got the name of the series from David Wood's website, Answering Islam. So in this episode, I'm going to talk about some double standards, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the project before I get into reading the manuscript. So this project was started, among other, I guess you could call this a debunking video as well, but I've done debunking videos on things like ancient aliens, Afrocentrism, pseudoscientific and pseudo-historic claims, like the Egyptians had the light bulb and such. And generally, I've taken the principles of my arguments there, which is basically just using logic and good sources, and brought it to this, which I call Answering Anti-Islam. I'm trying to incorporate more videos and media to make these episodes more exciting, so you're not just listening to me talk all day. So here we go with episode 6, The Double Standard. Today, I'm going to address the double standards applied to Islam. In episode 5, I emphasized criticizing Muslims or Islam is somehow a replacement for those who first made a big stink about other minorities, namely Jews and blacks. I think because Muslims are becoming a larger minority, it gives them someone to freely hate. I often hear the claim, if ISIS, ISIL are Muslims, then the KKK is Christian. But I can go much further. During the totalitarian rule of Nazi Germany, they indeed had Christian supporters. So, here you can plainly see so-called Christians essentially promoting Hitler, arguably the most hated man in history. Does this mean all Christians, because at some point in their history, hate Jews? Of course not. However, some claim that Islam is only about terrorism, but, like any Christian terrorist, Islamist terrorism may be in relation to a religion, but more importantly, it's terrorism. One need only look at the hadith about warfare to see organizations like ISIS defy basic principles about it. Here's a hadith narrated by Abu Bakr, considered an incredibly reliable source, as not only the second caliph, but a companion of the Prophet ﷺ. O people, I charge you with 10 rules, learn them well. Stop, O people, that I may give you 10 rules for your guidance in the battlefield. Do not commit treachery or deviate from the right path. You must not mutilate dead bodies, neither kill a child nor a woman, nor an aged man. Bring no harm to the trees, nor burn them with fire, especially those which are fruitful. Slay not any of the enemy's flock, save for your food. You are likely to pass by people who have devoted their lives to monastic services. Leave them alone. So here, you can see that ISIS is not applying these rules to their actions, because they kill women and children. Some white nationalists would love you to believe in Christian identity. They believe all biblical figures were so-called white. They believe so-called white people are the original Israelites. In this complete perversion of Christianity, some think that any given minority is an instrument of God for punishment of so-called white people.
No, I never had any bad experiences with anyone.
Neither did I.
Mine came completely through reading and studying out of the Bible and literature and different books and things. And talking to people, like Pastor Miles, Pastor Butler, just talking to people and to people that believe the same. And a lot of people think that it stems from hate, but I don't think it really stems from hate. It stems from knowing that we should be separate. That's not hate. That's just knowing that you should be separate and you should be with your own kind. It doesn't mean that you hate them, and it doesn't mean that you want to go out and do anything badly to them. It just means you want to be separate. You just don't want to be integrated with them.
Your non-white people have babies every 9 months and don't seem to worry if they got to sleep 4 or 5 to a bed, and yet white people are the only ones that are practicing birth control. The intelligent white people that should be having babies to have intelligent kids are not having them, and you got these very low IQ people who are having, I'm talking about abstract IQ, I'm talking about natural IQ, natural thinking ability, which is abstract, you know, the square hole and the round peg, you know, little odds and ends like that. These people don't have the IQ, and they're having all these babies, and their babies don't have low IQ.
In relation to race, it's very simple. The non-white people are an instrument of God, whereby he punishes us, actually, when we do the wrong things. It's written in the Bible how many times Israel disobeyed the word of God and was taken into captivity by assorted Philistines and many other kind of forbidden people. And who were they? They were, today we would call them mongrels, if not altogether colored. And once the return of Jesus is effectuated, then these people are no longer needed. They are here to serve the purpose of being the scourge of God.
Even the Bible talks about, in several different instances, talks about the return of Christ, and says that in the last days, they'll be like the days of Sodom and the days of Gomorrah. So there shall be eating and drinking and so on. And one of the problems in Sodom, as you all know, was homosexuality. And Christ says that prior to his return, that the homosexuals are going to become a real problem in society. And in another reference, he says, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall be coming in the Son of Man. And in the days of Noah, it was massive race mixing. Most churches teach us, well, Noah was just a righteous man, and this is why he was preserved. But Noah was a man, according to the Bible, that's perfect in generations. The word generations means race. And so Noah was one of the few individuals at that time who was not racially polluted. So the two major things that are going to come about in society during this period and this crisis in which we're facing was massive race mixing and homosexuality. And we're seeing both of these things today.
Does this define Christianity? I think not. I would argue that this is not even Christian. Indeed, when we look at the bigger picture, there is a diverse set of orthodox views that constitutes Christianity, and thus the same with all religions. However, terrorism does not constitute Christianity, nor Islam. I've noticed there are some rehashes of old claims made by the far right. What used to be claimed about Jews, for example, that the kosher process is cruel, is now instead a claim about halal slaughter, despite the fact the two are very similar. I've also seen similar instances of previous claims made about Jews taking over the government, which was called Zog, or Zionist Occupied Government, and now I see those same fringe conservatives saying Islam is going to take over the government. Since little is known about Islam and Judaism in the US, these claims can be easily reapplied to pretty much either religion. The problem is, we've seen the result of anti-Judaism, but we're not seeing the problem of anti-Islam. It's a position based on ignorance of evidence, as I've proven in previous episodes like Smart People, Dumb Conclusions.
So some of these disgruntled wives get together and decide to ask Muhammad for equal treatment. Here's Muhammad's response. Do not injure me regarding Aisha. The revelation does not come to me when I am in the garment of any woman except Aisha. In other words, don't complain about Aisha. Allah gives me revelations when I'm wearing Aisha's garments, but not when I'm wearing your garments. So Allah obviously favors Aisha over the rest of you. Now stop asking for equal treatment. This hadith raises a lot of questions, among them. What in the name of RuPaul is Muhammad doing wearing women's clothes?
So really now we get into the problem of interpretation, and of course he's going to interpret it in an extreme way because he's not a Muslim, but the way I interpret this is in the garment of Aisha, meaning under her protection, in her presence. It's not that hard to see, or even because of her love. There are many great stories of Muslims in America, but my favorite is that of a man known in the US as Hajj Ali. His actual name was Haji Ali. Citizen of the Ottoman Empire, Haji Ali went on to camel jockey for the United States Army. He started out as a breeder and trainer, and later head rider of an exercise conducted by the U.S. Army using camels. At the time, the Army relied on other beasts of burden that had never seen a camel in their life. Despite ending in failure, Mr. Jolly was a legend in the community where his grave sports a handsome brass camel. I love this story because it's just some guy in another land, and people respected him for his skills and antics. They never thought, well, our English ancestors fought these guys in the Crusades, so we should fight them now. After being hired in 1856, in 1864, the U.S. Army auctioned off its fleet of camels. The loving plaque reads, "The last camp of Haji Ali. Born somewhere in Syria, about 1828. Died at Quartzsite, December 16th, 1902. Came to this country February 10th, 1856. Camel driver, packer, scout, over 30 years of faithful aid to the U.S. government. Arizona Highway Department, 1935. Humayun Khan, in 2004 while serving in Iraq, moved his unit behind him and proceeded on foot towards a suspected improvised explosive device. He was killed after it exploded. Captain Khan was posthumously awarded a Purple Heart and Bronze Star. Captain Khan was also a Muslim. Both of these men show that, despite the belief of some so-called conservatives, Muslims actually are happy to serve the United States. They don't want to impose Sharia law upon her. Although we don't all agree what is included in Sharia law contains basic ideals of Islam, such as the oneness of God or Tawhid. Ergo, by banning Sharia law in whatever interpretive form, you're effectively banning the practice of Orthodox Islam. It's the equivalent of the Nicene Creed being banned, the basis for both Catholic and Protestant beliefs. Banning Sharia law is the equivalent of banning the Jewish halakha law. Banning I am the Lord Hashem and ye shall not have any gods before me kind of puts a damper on the entire concept of Christianity, huh? In fact, Sharia law also agrees there is only one Lord, so by banning Sharia law, you're also banning Judaism and subsequently Christianity, since they too are monotheistic. Sharia law certainly does influence English-style state laws, but it can't push religious practices, i.e. prayer, on non-Muslims. Crazy like a fox? Possibly. But there is no question about where the Constitution stands on this issue. The very banishment of a belief system is automatic support of the contrary belief system. This is the entire idea behind separation of church and state.
I'm quite happy to remove this because this is not what should belong in this Parliament. My question is
Order. Point of order, Senator Wong.
Waiting the question.
Thank you. Senator Hanson, your question.
to Senator Brandis, the Attorney-General. Senator Brandis, in light of our national security of this nation, will you work with the...
Order on my left.
To
On my
actually
left.
ban the burqa in Australia, considering...
Order. Just a moment, Senator Hanson. I need to hear the question. So can I have some order on my left and my right? Senator Hanson, would you commence your question again, please?
In light of what is happening with national security, there has been 13 foiled national threats against us with terrorism. 3 that have been successful, and Australians have lost their lives. Terrorism is a true threat to our country. Many Australians are very much in fear of it.
Order.
What I would like to ask on behalf of the Australian people, considering there has been a large majority of Australians wish to see the banning of the burqa. Our 2 former Prime Ministers,
Order.
Julia Gillard...
Senator Hanson, the time for asking the question has been expired. Order on my left. Senator...
So this woman is an outspoken critic of Islam. Clearly, she calls, quote, on behalf of the Australian people for the banning of the burqa. This goes completely against the Constitution of Australia. Section 116 of the Australian Constitution makes it illegal to impose religious observance. Imposing religious observance would also apply to any garb. In this ad hoc law, one could conceivably ban a nun's religious habit as a burqa. It amazes me how pro-democratic, yet unconstitutional, these critics are.
Attorney General, Senator Brandis.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Hanson, no, we will not be banning the burqa. Now, Senator Hanson, I am not going to pretend to ignore the stunt that you have tried to pull today by arriving in the chamber dressed in a burqa when we all know that you are not an adherent of the Islamic faith. And I would caution you and counsel you, Senator Hanson, with respect, to be very, very careful of the offence you may do to the religious sensibilities of other Australians. We have about 500,000 Australians in this country of the Islamic faith, and the vast majority of them are law-abiding, good Australians. And Senator Hanson, it is absolutely consistent with being a good, law-abiding Australian and being a strict adherent Muslim. Now, Senator Hanson, for the last 4 years, I have had responsibility preeminently among the ministers, subject to the Prime Minister, for national security policy. And I can tell you, Senator Hanson, that it has been the advice of each Director General of Security with whom I have worked, and each Commissioner of the Australian Federal Police with whom I have worked, that it is vital for their intelligence and law enforcement work that they work cooperatively with the Muslim community. And to ridicule that community, to drive it into a corner, to mock its religious garments, is an appalling thing to do, and I would ask you to reflect on what you have done.
Order.
These critics are also so blind of fact and historical context, they don't see the incongruity of their beliefs. That it's okay if one religion does this, but that other religion can't do the same thing. This event sets a precedent to label a certain religion compulsively, which is ad hoc law. This is more like marriage of my religious views and separation of church and state. Complete doublethink. The amount of false material out there is overwhelming, to say the least, but fighting falsehoods with truth is the easiest way to sway those with a neutral mind on the subject. Someone being rational would not consider an Islamic student an expert, let alone the writers of religionofpeace.com or Senator Hanson, for example. Meanwhile, in America,
anti-Muslim protesters hurl insults and abuse at people attending an Islamic charity fundraiser in Yorba Linda, California. The February 13th incident is seen by area Muslims as new and disturbing evidence of Islamophobia among some sections in America's right-wing Tea Party movement. Shahid Hussein took his family to the charity event.
This is the first time in America I get scared for my children.
They're saying go back home and get out of my country and all that.
Makes me feel that I'm I don't belong here.
and I'm not wanted.
What was perhaps most disturbing for the people who were here that night was learning that an elected public official at the protest rally appeared to be calling for violence against Muslims.
I don't even care if you think I'm crazy anymore.
That's Deborah Pauly, a Republican and member of the nearby Villa Park City Council.
I know quite a few Marines who will be very happy to help these terrorists to an early meeting in paradise.
Conservative Tea Party activists who organized the protest say it was meant to condemn the presence of speakers at the fundraiser, including Siraj Wahhaj. U.S. prosecutors had linked Wahhaj to the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, but he was never charged and has denied any involvement.
We are here to declare that radical Islam, Sharia, is not welcome in our community.
Lugo and others at the rally have tried to distance themselves from the more outspoken protesters.
None of the organizers knew who any of them were.
25-year-old Maheen Siddiqui attended the fundraiser.
It was really scary because at one point they started banging on the windows when people were praying, banging the walls with their shoes.
But she says she and others in the community will not be intimidated.
Just because I'm a Muslim doesn't make me any less American.
Rob Reynolds, Al Jazeera, Yorba Linda, California.
In that particular clip, a congresswoman wanted to ban Sharia law. Yes, there are some on both sides who drink the Kool-Aid and think that Sharia law, a spiritual law governing Muslims' behavior, can be turned into civic law on its own. Sharia law as an English-style system is more than obviously incompatible with the separation of church and state.
Welcome back to Hannity. So in the wake of Dr. Benjamin Carson expressing concern about a Muslim becoming president of the United States, well, we decided to launch a special Hannity investigation to find out if American Muslims think that Sharia law should supersede the U.S. Constitution. Earlier today, we sent out Fox News contributor David Webb to an Islamic cultural center in New York City. Now watch this closely.
Your thoughts, should Sharia law supersede the U.S. Constitution?
No, but I think the Sharia law is made by God, by Allah, and the Constitution is made by people. So it's not the same.
Do you believe that Sharia law should be above the U.S. Constitution?
Yes.
Yes. Sharia law is completely different than the United States Constitution. As a Muslim, you practice my Islamic law. As a Muslim, but United States Constitution, as a citizen, I have to respect the Constitution. Nothing to do with Sharia law. It's a Muslim country, Sharia law is allowed. Other country, no. You have to have a right Constitution.
Should any religious law supersede the U.S. Constitution at any time? Any denomination?
Maybe in the future.
The U.S. Constitution deserve all the people living in U.S. their rights, right? So Sharia law does not contradict with this. Sharia law just protect our dignified. We are like human being, be respectful, to be respectful in the society.
So you think that the U.S. Constitution should be the law of the land in the U.S.
Also helpful to protect our Sharia.
Should Sharia law be over the U.S. Constitution?
Yes, maybe. Every country have a different policy and different law, but I respect the law in any country I go.
Do you believe that the tenets of Sharia law should be over the U.S. Constitution?
No.
That U.S. Constitution, which is made by people, and the Sharia law is made by Allah, so that is all the way above. That has to be definitely in the land, not for the America, for the whole world, would be above the Sharia
law. So that
law
should be above the U.S.
Definitely.
Constitution?
Yes.
Joining me now with reaction, syndicated radio talk show host out of Boston, Howie Carr, the author of Demystifying Islam, Tackling the Tough Questions, the national spokesperson for the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, Haris Zafar, and Fox News contributor David Webb. You had a significant number, and by the way, this backs up a poll that came out last year that even a majority of Muslims in America think that Sharia should supersede the Constitution.
Yeah, and look, there was no problem getting these questions and answers from these folks. You saw a wide variety of them. We gave them a chance to answer. The problem, and I have this problem with anyone, anywhere who believes that any religious belief supersedes the U.S. Constitution. We're a nation where the Constitution guarantees your religious freedom and where your religion does not trump it. Most people believe that in America. There are Muslims who want to live here and live under our Constitution, but too much, we find a growing number of them that believe Sharia should supersede the U.S. Constitution. And one there admit, look, in other countries, it's Sharia, but look at those countries where Sharia is the law.
Mr. Safar, while you are a minority in the Muslim community in many ways, and more liberal-minded in your views, generally speaking, we know the application of Sharia renders or relegates women and minorities and other religious faiths to second-class citizens. So that's just a fact when you look at the application of Sharia in Muslim countries. So if you have more than half of Muslims in America that want Sharia, they are basically saying they don't support the U.S. Constitution, where you have freedom of religion and freedom of expression.
Yeah, well, it's what surprises me. The reason this surprises me because the most fundamental principle in Islam on this subject is that the law of the land supersedes all other laws. So in the verses in the Quran that talk about government do not specify any religious involvement. They say put your trust in those that are in authority in your country, and it tells those people in authority to be just, not religious.
Okay,
as long
but wait
as
a
they're
minute.
just,
But the true
requirement.
application of Sharia in countries is women can't drive, women have to dress a certain way, they can't be seen in public with men that are not their relatives. In some cases, women need 4 male eyewitnesses for rape. Gays and lesbians are killed. Those that leave the faith are viewed as apostates. They are killed for such religious liberty. So the reality is, it is at odds with the U.S. Constitution. It's practical application. Howie Carr.
So what? Oh.
Well, yeah, Sean, obviously this is what Ben Carson was talking about when he said he couldn't advocate for electing a Muslim president. And this is just a very troubling fact of life in society. I mean, and the fact that the Democrats are attacking Ben Carson over saying this, I mean, this is a Sharia law. There's no gay marriage, for instance. Abortion, as you pointed out, is punishable by death. Blasphemy. You know, no one's talking about rounding up Muslims. Certainly not Ben Carson like FDR did during World War II. But this is just a fundamentally Sharia law is at odds with the Bill of Rights.
Howie, I want you to expand on that because fundamentally the Quran and Islam, I'm not talking about radical Islamists, the Quran and Islam are fundamentally at odds with the Constitution. Isn't that the truth?
No,
correct.
It's not the truth.
You know, did you ever think, Sean, that we would come to a point in our lifetimes where the Constitution and the Bill of Rights would be on the table? No. It's just mind-boggling, and I can't, and I don't understand why the Democrats are so down on Carson. You know, they have litmus tests, so-called, for Supreme Court justices. If you're against abortion rights, then you know they're not going to vote for you, including Hillary Clinton, Chuck Schumer. Now they have an abortion. Now they have a litmus test for Citizens United, the Supreme Court decision about the First Amendment. So I mean, if Ben Carson wants to make this a litmus test, if you're for Sharia law, he's not going to vote for you. What's the problem? I'm with Ben Carson.
Yeah, and by the way, you know, if I ask you, Mr. Zafar, you know, where are the Catholic and Christian and Protestant and Jewish temples in Muslim countries, and what are the restrictions, or what is the punishment for anyone that speaks out against the very extremely controversial life of Muhammad? What would happen to them in a Muslim country under Sharia as applied currently in Muslim countries today?
Right. And so what you have clearly and very accurately defined as the system of government in countries like Iran and Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, Afghanistan, there's a reason why within the worldwide Ahmadiyya Muslim community and other Muslims as well, do we continually and consistently condemn them not just on like
small minority. You can't even get, as I understand it, in Pakistan,
okay,
you can't get a Muslim funeral if you're an Ahmadiyya.
The U.S. The United States
Sean, they just had a major march in Copenhagen, Denmark. They want to make Denmark a Muslim nation. There was a
but you know where part of
party.
this needs to begin, Sean, is that there's a reformation needed, and the Ahmadiyya Muslims, the Sufis, there are other groups. Just like we had a reformation in the Christian church, there's time for a Muslim reformation, and it's at hand.
David,
and the
they are
and that's why it's very important to remember.
But here's my point. In the United States, they can create a foundation and begin to spread. It's
But-
not
but-
going to
but
happen
David,
overnight.
They're not even
That's why the US
considered Muslims
Constitution
by
is
the
paramount.
98%.
I know, no, I hear you, but it's got to
Well, that's
start
why, Sean,
somewhere,
that's why
and
it's important
Muslims
to
have to
remember.
solve this problem.
Last word,
That's why
Hassan.
it's important to remember the U.S. constitutes less than 5% of the world population. Obviously, they're not unimportant. It's all about the works and the impact. And look at that. The Ahmadiyya Muslim community has built and operated over 15,000 mosques in the world, more than any other Muslim organization.
You are less than 2%. You are less than 2%.
And the U.S. is less than 5%. But our significance is what really matters. And that's why within the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, we are leading the Reformation. The U.S. Constitution absolutely is paramount, and we're loyal
Saudi
citizens
Arabia
of this
offering
country.
to build in Germany for the new refugees, so-called, that are coming?
And we're with you to condemn
Germany.
Saudi Arabia and their clerics. Absolutely.
Thank you all for being with us.
So, here you can see a fundamental misunderstanding between Muslims and the non-Muslims of the West, that Sharia law is a practice, not a law. Asking a Muslim if Sharia law is better than the Constitution is like asking a Jew, are the Ten Commandments better than the Constitution? Both believe these laws are from Allah, ergo, they will believe them greater than any law man can come up with. So, if a viewer doesn't understand Sharia law is not so-called English-style law, meaning parliamentary representational government, or even a dictatorship uses English-style law, one would be led to believe it was by this presentation. Double standards everywhere. The whole idea of a constitutional republic like the United States is that you aren't supposed to subject your religious views upon the population. An anti-gay Muslim wanting to ban innocent activities for homosexuals because he's a Muslim is no different than a Christian wanting to ban Sharia law because they're a Christian. As a Muslim, however, I am so very thankful to be born in the United States, where I can worship freely, and there's nothing anybody can do about it. Unlike some of my fellow so-called conservatives, I recognize everyone's God-given rights to religious practices. Stay tuned for our next episode, Making the Unreasonable Sound Reasonable.